Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Dr. Elisa Show here on 1-2 Radio, where we are changing the way you look at and think about and feel, and listen to the world. How are you? I hope you heard the show before me. It's so cool to listen to the 1-2 News with Katie and Scott. And thank you for staying tuned for my show and for joining in either energetically or in the Facebook site. I know you know how to do this, but if you're new, the way you join into the chat is you go to 12radio.com and you click on chat. And Scott will make sure that you are in our private Facebook site. And yeah, I know for a lot of you, and definitely for me, Facebook is not my favorite thing, but it's kind of fun to join in just in the private chat room for 1-2 Radio. So please feel free to do that. If you're out there and you don't feel like joining in, just send me a energetic hi so I can feel you, because it's so great to be live with you today. And this is a live show. I know sometimes I pre-record them so you get something new even though I'm not around, but it is a live show. I am actually home. I'm not on the road. I am in my loft office looking at the beautiful Colorado foothills and sky. And so very glad to be here with you. So I have a great show today because I have an amazing guest who I'll introduce in just a few minutes. But I want to just give you some updates and encourage you to jump into the site. Hello, Norella, and hello, Kai. Kai is a 1-2 advisor and has a show of her own. And it's always wonderful when I get other radio hosts on my show. So just some sort of brief updates. What are some brief updates? I'm going to put some links in the Facebook site for some sessions with me. I want to, again, let you know where we're headed for the rest of the year on this show. My personal focus with people is helping them build prosperity. And there are actually, what I do is sometimes been called a financial therapist. I don't use that term in part because my focus is a little bit different than pure therapy, and because there's actually a certification you can get as a financial therapist. I have a PhD in psychology, so I'm not actually interested in going and getting that specific certification, but I do that kind of work with people. And the show, what I'm hoping for from my shows is, and you know, the tagline is inspiring a renaissance of spirit. What I'm hoping is every week you leave a little bit inspired, and not just inspired, but with something that you feel actually helps you. So that through this week you feel that maybe you know how to make some changes or embrace those issues you're facing, like what to do long term, not just today. We're in an interesting astrological time. It's one of my favorite times of year. I have to admit, I do love the fall. If it wasn't followed by winter, it would be my very favorite season of the year. I could do fall, summer. I'd be really, really happy. But it's a beautiful season, and it's a Scorpio season. And I'm a double Aquarius with a Scorpio rising, and I love that Scorpio energy. I love that depth it takes us to. And we are in a Mercury retrograde. And I want you to think about that as a time machine, because that's what it is. It takes us backwards for about 3 weeks. We go back in time, and we get to revisit decisions we've made and choices and ways we've looked at the world and experiences, and then make different choices going forward. Like really, it's an actual time machine that we get to experience on a regular basis. So it's not that it's anything bad. It's like a reboot, and we can all use a reboot. So for the next several weeks, what I'm hoping is that you can take and embrace some of the messages from my shows about building financial prosperity for yourself. So hello if you're here. Good morning if you're around. I'm also going to put in my site, and I'll do the same for my guest once we get going. But I'm also going to put in my some links to my both my email-based sessions and my time-based sessions that try to focus on your soul's craving, because the way I approach prosperity is exactly that. What is it your soul craves? And let's move in that direction. So that's the commercial. That's what I'm up to. I hope you had a great Halloween. I taught a live class at a winery on how to read a crystal ball, and a winery was a perfect place to do it because everybody had many glasses of red wine. And so it was really, really fun. If that's something that interests you, let me know. I did do one in 1-2 Academy. I can bring it back and do it again. So enough chatter. I hope you're doing well. And what I'd like to do is introduce my guest and let her join us, because we're going to have an amazing conversation today. So my guest today is Caroline Nettle. She talks about herself as being a emotional, well, I like to call it dealing with emotional prosperity. She said what she really helps people do is clean out the muck, their emotional muck. And the reason I love that is I spend a lot of time around horses, and that's a perfect image. Mucking out the stalls is so close to like mucking out your emotional self. And so we're going to talk today in hopefully with a lot of laughter, but in depth, about emotional prosperity and how do people who have that actually think. So Caroline, welcome to my show. How are you doing today?
I'm really good, thank you. And thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
This is going to be fun. Tell us a little bit about where because you are over the pond, right? Tell us about where you are and what the evening looks like there. It's about 5 p.m. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just after 5 o'clock. It's already dark because our time has gone back.
Right.
And it's been raining most of the day, in fact, for a couple of weeks, which is really depressing. But anyway,
yes.
The trees love it. The plants love it. It's a little bit flooded here and there, so not so fun outside. But I love this time of year because you can just feel the nights closing in, and then you get to huddle around the fire. I love this. Love it, love it, love it.
Yeah. Give me a little. So where are you geographically? Give me a sense of where you are.
I'm a town called Darlington, which is just near Newcastle upon Tyne. That's probably one people have heard of.
Okay.
Just down from Scotland. Pretty north. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Wow. So beautiful time of year there. I do love the huddle around the fire. I have a fireplace, a gas fireplace inside and a small fire pit outside. And it's just so fun to be in that time of year where I can cuddle up and with my dog and be in front of the fire. And I have to say I get a lot more reading done now that the nights are longer. It's dark for a longer period of time. I'm doing a lot more reading, and I all of a sudden rediscover knitting, and all of a sudden I'm playing my piano again. It's amazing how that shorter daylight pushes me deeper into that creative expression. So do you have a similar experience? Like, what does the shorter daylight and longer dark do for you?
Well, it's interesting because for me, being the new kid on the block at 1-2 Listen, this is the time that I'm online doing my readings because you guys are sort of catching up, and so my evenings at the moment are looking like I'm doing readings and healing sessions, which is fantastic. I'm really loving that. But for me, that's what it's looking like at the moment.
So what I want to do is just tell us a little bit about your style and what you do, and then we'll get into the conversation. But just so people know, because I know you've done healing sessions for quite a while in your life, haven't you?
Yeah. So I have a feeling I was a bit late to the party and didn't really discover that this was what I was supposed to do till way into my 30s. And I think that was just, I don't know. I said before, I was doing what my parents had told me or society had told me that I was supposed to do. I got a good job. I did lots of, climbing the ladder and all that sort of thing. And then I myself got sick, which brought me to this gift, which I'm so grateful for, although at the time it wasn't much fun. This is a system that allows me to read other people's energy. And so what you learn, and everybody can learn this, it's not just me, but what you learn is how to ask the clever part of the body, and the body is a phenomenal machine that we walk around in every day and probably take for granted. But I talk to the part of you that tells you to go to bed, to eat food, to run away from the tiger, to, get rid of the invasive things that are going down into your lungs, like sneezing and coughing. So I talk to that real wisdom that you have, and I ask it what's going on for this particular person that I'm working with, and what's stopping that person from getting back to being healthy and happy and in harmony and loving their life. That's effectively the what. And then not long after I started doing it, I discovered that the thing that I seem to be really, really good at is helping people remove massive emotional issues. So I seem to be able to discover what the emotional blockages are and then take them away, which really allows healing on lots of different levels.
So that mucking out that you and I talked about in the past, right? That's just that I love. I mean, I think you have to have been around horses to actually get the power of that image, right? Of mucking out a stall, mucking out your emotional self. Mm-hmm. So you and I have a great deal in common. I don't do that kind of healing. I have to tell you, though, my best friend is a naturopath, and she says that she follows the light through the body and can find where it's blocked. And that's it. But she doesn't in any way say she's a medical intuitive or a reader or anything. She feels your pulses. But I have just learned the power of that kind of healing. And it's a blend. She recommends a blend of Eastern and Western. When you need the Western, you use it. Mm-hmm. But there is that power of what the body is saying, right? That the message the body itself is giving. So I think it's a very powerful thing you said. And I want to follow that because the show, we've talked about this, the show is about prosperity and the ways that we build it. And but sort of my major focus with people is the ways that we emotionally keep ourselves from having financial prosperity. That it's rarely, financial prosperity is rarely about dollars in our checking account. It's almost always about emotions, beliefs, behaviors, but that emotional and often spiritual level around prosperity. So, and if I ask you a question, you're like, I'm not prepared to answer that, just let me know. But if I said to you, so what does emotional prosperity mean to you? Can you talk about, so if I'm emotionally prosperous, what would that mean to you? What would my life be like?
Good question.
Or what would your life be like? Because I think you are emotionally prosperous. And so there's a way you probably think about your emotional life or your spiritual life that's different than somebody who lives in a poverty mentality around their emotional body.
Yes, wow, where to start? Okay, so the short answer to that is spiritually clean, I think. I don't mean clean, but that's the only word that I can come up with right now. So what I mean by that is I have a small issue with some of the new age, just think happily and positively and then everything's going to be all right. And that really doesn't sit with me well. I think all of us have been put onto this earth school, which is probably one of the hardest soul lessons that we can learn in order to learn whatever it is we came to be here. So each person will have their own individual lessons or events that they need to go through or traumas or whatever it is that they've, I think, agreed to. So someone that, let's say, plays the victim or isn't prepared to look at their stuff or is so headlong into their career that they don't feel anything because they're so propelled forward in money and power and, although all that glitters is not gold, but all those things that they're chasing at the detriment of doing the inner work. And doing the inner work can often be difficult, challenging, mucky. But I can only answer that from my point of view. I think I had a really rocky and challenging start, which I also drank a little bit too much. That's the understatement of the planet. And other really adaptive behaviors that I took on to deal with the amount of pain I was in emotionally.
Right.
And how do I say this? So when I started on the journey of, do you know what, this is not working for me. My life is in ruins and I'm not really very happy. What do I need to do? And of course, the answer is never out there. It's always inside.
Right. Yes.
So I've worked through a lot of the muck, basically. I've done it with a fork, inspected it, chucked it out, thrown it on the compost, whatever I've done. But so for me, the reason I can sit next to someone who's in abject pain is because I've dealt with it, but I also know it. And so emotionally prosperous, if I bring it back to that, is someone who can really say, I know who I am, and I'm completely okay with the fact that I have warts and wrinkles and, did that and said that and feel guilty about this, but despite all of that, I am okay. So to me, emotionally prosperous is someone who totally accepts themselves. I don't know if you agree with that.
I love that. And so let me just sort of play back to you some of what I heard, right? So you're not talking about getting to a point where I have no wounds, right? You're getting to a point where you recognize I have scars and I have wounds and I have wrinkles and they're tracks of this life I've led, and I'm okay with them. And that's emotional healing. I mean, when we get there, there's a sense of emotional prosperity. Like, yes, I've lived a life. And because I've lived a life and I bear the marks of that life, good and bad, right? I know how to walk as my authentic self in this world without apology and without shame.
That last little bit is a massive lorry without a little word, but it's, and I have to say in answer to that, yes, it would have been so easy for me to stay stuck in the alcoholism, stuck in the victim, stuck in the poor me. And they were T-shirts that I wore really well, if you had blah, 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 blah. And now I look back and I'm really grateful to my parents for what they did. And I know that sounds ridiculous. And I know that if you'd have said this to me 10 years ago, I'd have been heartily offended if someone had said this to me. But now I genuinely believe it. And it's, their lesson to me was one of complete rejection. Bless them. They did it brilliantly. Thank you. And it has allowed me to grow into this person who now can stand on her own 2 feet, has got a sense of self, who I had to learn it through all my lessons. But yeah, it just, like, it's mine now, and I'm so proud of myself and I love it. But it would have taken, I don't know how to say this, but in other lifetimes, maybe I wasn't so graceful. Shall I say it like that?
So, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it, that without those wounds, we don't grow. Without those challenges, we don't grow. I do believe that our soul comes here with a craving, and that we are in a life that then helps us best manifest and create and move towards our soul's growth, what our soul craves, and that's why we're in a body. And it's a very Jewish Kabbalistic notion that my soul is in partnership with my body, and we're doing this together. And that the challenges I faced are the ones that I needed to move me out of sort of my past life or my other ways of doing things. And you said something else, that the reason you can help people heal is because you've been there, you've had the pain, and you've come through the pain to this emotionally prosperous part of your life. And so you can recognize it in others. And I think that was a powerful statement, because so many times, and I have to agree with you that there are some new agey comments I hear that make me want to cringe occasionally, and some of it is almost as if we have to get to a point of sort of an odd point of perfection. Our life is always calm. We're always making the best choices. We're always something, as opposed to, no, I'm willing to go through the muck. I'm willing to go through the muck because on the other side of that is my best self. Right? I'm gonna go deep, and what a perfect conversation for Scorpio season, right? Because that's what Scorpios are brilliant at, and why everybody's a little afraid of them, right? Because Scorpios go deep. They go deep in themselves. They know what's in there. So I love your sort of view of the gratitude we have for the roughness that I've lived because of who that's made me. So here's my next question for that is, you can go through that roughness, and you alluded to this. You can go through that roughness and choose to stay in the poor me victim, unhealthy for your life. Or you can go through that, embrace it as a challenge, and say the other side of this is prosperity. What do you think helped you shift? Because you left that behind and you moved. Do you have a sense of what helped you with that?
I think sometimes it can be just as simple as making a decision. And that sounds really glib, but I think there's something very powerful in the day where you have just had enough. You are on your knees. This cannot go on. And the decision is made. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And you maybe talk to something outside of yourself, be that God or your higher self or whatever you like to call it, unicorns, I don't mind. But you talk to a higher power and you say, help me. And I think for me, that's happened twice in my life. The first time, really ungracious. I mean, gosh, I'm embarrassed about how I did it the first time. The second time was like, oh, I've been tricked. This is really unfair. But both times were exactly when they were supposed to, exactly when I was ready.
Right.
And I think for me, I'm not saying that everybody's got to be like this, but this is my personality. I just had it running through my veins. Doesn't matter what it takes, I'm going to get well. And I don't mean physically well. I think I mean spiritually and emotionally. And I am a work in progress. There is nothing perfect about my life. But, well, that's not true. There are perfect things, but I don't know. Sorry, there are some things that are going swimmingly well and I'm really excited. But, I think once we've learned all our lessons, then maybe it's time to go home. But what I wanted to pick up on what you said was, there may be some people on this planet who things are really calm for. They always make good decisions and they're perfectly, again, I've used that word, I don't like that word, and they're really, really happy. And I am not in any way mocking them. I'm super jealous, but I'm not mocking them because maybe their lesson was to learn to be uninterested. No, that's the wrong word. Content, or you know what I mean. So maybe
right.
this lifetime could be one of a little bit, in my book, dull. Bless them. But so I think it's about respecting everybody where they're at. But my first comment about the New Age is this: I wrote one of my best viewed articles online. It's called "Why Positive Thinking is Making Us Depressed." Mm-hmm. And I wrote that because I know that things like CBT great. It works for some people, and I love that. But if you've got deep trauma, you are wired differently. You do not know how to experience joy and prosperity and love, because your brain is so stuck in the
Right.
God, life's so hard, and and it's awful. And so just being told then to, smile, I'm sure it will make you feel better, and all. Oh, that just irritates me probably. And it makes you feel that you're not doing it properly, so you go into depression. And I have experienced that myself, so I'm talking from my own experience. Because everybody else is happy, why can't I be? And it wasn't until I really took a long, hard look at, what it was I wanted in my life. Did I want to be miserable and stuck in a room and all of those things? And I had to say no. But going right back around to something you said earlier, I learned this technique, and then I learned how to speak to the angels. And I think the two combined is how I now do the healing. And for me, when I first encountered the angels and that incredible unconditional love, I ran screaming, literally. I didn't. I cried, I screamed. It was like, what's this? I hate it. But I was washed in it for so long and so consistently that I gradually learned that I was lovable and that life was okay, and that I had some huge angels who had my back. And yeah, it was a really big turning point for me. So now I love to work with their energy because it's just so gorgeous. It's like having a big hug from a really, 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 really wonderful person who's obviously not here. But so yeah, that's how I do my work these days, is kind of mix the two. Yeah, and I love it.
Right. That's all of that is lovely. Let me pick up on a couple pieces of it. I do believe, so one of the similarities the two of us have, and you said it and it really resonated with me, is I had changed careers. I was really struggling financially, and I honestly couldn't figure out why. Nothing I did was working. It was dragging everything else in my life down. And I remember the night I went out and looked up at the sky and said, I do not care what it takes. I will face whatever it takes, but I'm not living like this. I will do whatever it takes. And you just crack open a door, universe, and I'll do the work. I'll go through. And I had been working on a PhD. I changed careers. I had a master's in geology. I'd gotten a PhD at psych. I had all of these challenges and obstacles and blocks in my way. None of this was easy. And I made that commitment. And within 3 months, I had a full-time job. And I had a full-time job as a chair. I'd never even been a full-time faculty. I just stepped right into a chair. And I jumped from a chair to a dean at a different school. And then I jumped from a dean at that school to a dean at a university. The power of decision making. And we can track that back. Viktor Frankl talked about that. I don't know if you've ever read his writings, Man's Search for Meaning. But this was a book that changed my life many, many, many years ago. He was a survivor of 4 concentration camps, psychologist, and he wrote this book and said, humans can survive any what if they have a why. And the why is inside of us, and the why is why I want to survive. And I have a choice about how I deal with what comes at me. I may not have a choice in what comes at me, but I daily and minute by minute have a choice about what I do with that. And I remember thinking, if he could write that from the most horrific situation that you can possibly think of, right, concentration camps in World War II, and go on to build, then what was my excuse? Exactly what was my excuse, right? And I think so back to the beginning of what you said, that sometimes what changes us is that decision, and then the statement of that decision. I don't care what it takes. I am going to change. And there's really power in that.
Yeah. Sorry, but I just could not agree with you more. But I do know, sorry for interrupting, I didn't mean to. I do know that when I was in my deep depression and my, not being able to leave the house, I mean, I really wore that one well. too. But I was in it for quite some time, and in that state, I could not make a decision. It wasn't.
Yes.
It wasn't. There was always in me this deep desire to get well. So, if you are listening to this and it's something that you're thinking, yes, but I don't know, and I'm not sure, and I just really be kind to yourself, because there will come a day. And for me, it's always been really interesting that it's like, oh, I have to go and do that now. And I've done it, like I said, 2 or 3 times, and it's like, oh, this feels really natural. So I think if we push it, then maybe we're not doing it in the right energy or something. Because for me, I'll say it again, the doors just opened when I decided that it was time.
Right. So let's go back to, because I want to do this link, because I want to make sure I understand your work too. Yeah. So we do know that when people are in a deep depression, you're absolutely right. They cannot just make a decision to get up and be happy today or go do something. So the healing work you do is a combination of physical and emotional. Do I have that right?
Yes and no.
Okay. So good. So get me more to the yes, because and let me tell you why I'm asking the question. Sure. So if our listeners are dealing with depression, and depression is an illness, and you cannot just wake up one day and make a decision. I completely agree with you. And so the healing work you do, if somebody comes to you with that, is that both? So that's the question. Is it both physical and emotional, or what? Because you talked about sort of the way you work. How do you deal with that?
So I don't really mind how people get to me. I'm very excited to work with anyone. But here's what I'll say to that. So my belief is 97% of all illnesses, no matter what you present at, will have trapped emotional, I'm going to use the word trauma. I don't use it lightly, but there will be some kind of trauma. And let's be specific here. So a trauma to a 2-year-old, and I said this on the CA show, a trauma to a 2-year-old could be you taking my teddy bear away from me. Oh my gosh, that's the end of the world. And that might get stuck in your energy system. But if we look at, I wrote down a list before I came on, because I thought, why do we have stuck emotions? So we can have influences from past lives. Now, if I was hung as a witch, and I'm pretty sure I was, then I will have all sorts of funny things about fires and blah, blah, blah. Right. I could early childhood trauma. And I don't think any parent would ever try. Well, some do. I know that's true. But most parents are trying to protect their children and bring them up. But no parent can be perfect. So I think probably nearly everyone's got something that happened in their childhood which wasn't perfect. Should we say it like that? We can have inherited belief systems and inherited patterns of emotional distress, like anxiety, depression. They can be inherited. We will have absorbed belief systems and emotions from all of our teachers, all of our religious figures, all of the politicians, all of our peers, all of which may have nothing to do with my energy, but I will have, because we're just like this enormous sponge. So I might be carrying somebody else's anger or somebody else's anxiety. What else? So then we have one-off traumatic events like a car crash or falling off a horse or whatever it is. So those can be stuck in our system. And then we have suppressed emotions, and they are usually the biggest ones to shift. So I'll just say it how I say it. So if you say something now that makes me angry, the way that I should express my anger is to say, Elisa, that makes me angry. I'm very unhappy with you. But what we do instead is I ring my friend Anne and I go, you won't believe what that Elisa that is healthily expressing my anger towards you, which is clearly the wrong person and the wrong time. So when I don't express it to the person in the right instance, and I bitch about you to someone else, or I do something else, the body doesn't process the anger. When I say it to you, because you're the person that made me angry, hypothetically, then I'm expressing the anger and it leaves the body. But if I'm not, it gets pushed down. And the more I push down, the bigger it gets. And often I will go into your little toe or something if I'm doing a body scan, and I'll go, gosh, you're really angry, and it makes no sense whatsoever. But what I do is I find where the body has placed it, and usually it's in a place of weakness. So knees, it's a lot. We have it in elbow, that sort of thing, because the body has all this unprocessed anger or grief or anxiety or whatever the emotion is, and it has to store it somewhere. Now, really, all that anger that I have towards you, that I told my friend Anne, should go to the liver, and the liver should process it. But if the liver's, I've had a nice red wine the night before and some meat and some cheese, it's overworked. Almost every liver on the planet is overworked because of the toxins and all. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. That's a whole other talk. So the liver says, I don't want to deal with it. So it will be put somewhere in the body where there's a weakness. And so a lot of the work that I do, so you've been suppressing this anger your whole life and it's been going into your right knee. And then you come to me and you say, I can't walk. My right knee's really sore. So to you, it's a physical pain. To me, I can see that you've been perhaps not expressing your anger healthily or something. So, yes. Can't remember the question. Got so caught up in the answer.
It's okay. No, this is perfect. So, because let me follow up with it. This is great with prosperity, because this is what I do with people around finances. They come to me and say, I can't ever get ahead. I don't make enough money. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I can't get rid of my debt. And I have to tell you that I've worked with people who are basically millionaires it's the same conversation. They're making enough money. They're making six figures. Let's just leave it there. They're making six figures on a regular basis. And it's still the same conversation. And what I say is basically exactly what you're saying is I start with what does your soul crave? And it's moving you in a direction. And that direction, here's what I've discovered, is we're tied. We have a competing commitment. I have a commitment to grow in the direction of my soul, and I have a competing commitment that holds me back, and I have to find out what that is. And that commitment is often an old trauma or a connection we're fearful of letting go. So you come from a culture that says we don't get ahead, or you were raised in a family where men always have to make more than their wives, or you were taught somehow that money, if you have money, you're not spiritual. And I've had that said to me, I don't even know how many times, that spirituality is, that rich people can't be spiritual, right? I mean, I've had that said to me. And so it's a trauma. And I agree with you. It's probably stuck in the body. And where it shows up, often for me then, when I'm working with somebody, is in that energy of money. Because money's energy and prosperity's energy. And so it's exactly what you're saying. You come in and are able to find it at the emotional level via a complaint that somebody has of their physical body, perhaps. I'm looking at it and saying, there is something that's this other, that's holding you back. It's your competing commitment. And it is also the trauma that you've experienced around being successful, being independent. And what are those messages? And so I don't want to go back necessarily and dig them all up, but I do have people do a money story. What did you hear growing up about money? What did you notice growing up with money? Where were you praised and where were you criticized, either by parents or your culture or the world around you or friends, right? And what did that result in for you? And now let's move forward, because we want to acknowledge that competing. We want to acknowledge that that's there. I'm not going to spend years trying to talk about it, because I think that the more, when you talk about pushing it down, I also feel like if all we do is go back and talk about it over and over and over again, that we're focused on this wound that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, as opposed to saying, wow, that's there. And I don't have to live there. I can acknowledge it and I can recognize when it pulls me back, but it's not the direction I'm going. So I think different words, but I think a similar point of view in the work we do. Mine's focusing on money and those traumas, and yours is focusing on emotional healing. Does that make sense to you? Does that resonate with what you said?
Completely. And also, I would like to say, of the list that I read out, you may not know that that's what you're carrying. You may not know that that's in your energy. If I've brought in something from a past life, I've just found out, had a wonderful astrology reading. He said, gosh, you've had a lot of monastic lives. And I'm like, do you know that really suits the, God, do I really have to make money this lifetime? It's like, oh, so that really explains. So how could I know that if I wasn't told that? Early childhood trauma, some people don't remember their childhoods, inherited. Right. So it can be completely subconscious. And I heard a statistic that said we have 62,000 thoughts every day, of which 2,000 are conscious, which means 60,000 in your subconscious brain, which is basically trying to keep you alive. And if, when I was a little girl, I was bitten by a dog, so every time I see a dog in my subconscious brain, there'll be thousands of thoughts going around. Oh, dogs are dangerous. Don't go near that dog. So the subconscious mind is there to keep you healthy. But it also, I think, can really pull us out of, if I'm doing all this prosperity talking and thinking and mantras and affirmations, but my subconscious brain doesn't come along for the ride.
That's right.
Make it really challenging. So I think a lot of what we both do then, yeah, absolutely, is clearing out the muck. But from my point of view, I very often go into stuff that the person doesn't know, because sometimes I'll have a client in front of me and I'll say, gosh, this is a really strong influence from XYZ, whatever it might be. And they'll be like, no, I don't know. That doesn't resonate. And then I get a phone call going, oh, I spoke to my Aunt Myra and she said, absolutely, that's what happened to me when I was 3. So, yeah, I do have a lot of that, which makes me laugh. And but one of the things I wanted to talk about perhaps was an example of what can happen when you do clear these horrendous, energetic blocks that we have, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Because I think that's the next point. So for me, what happens when I work with people and they clear that is their finances turn around. And when their finances turn around, because I believe it's a relationship we have with money, right? It's a relationship we have with energy, then the other relationships also turn around. So what's your experience when you help people clear out the muck?
So just the most obvious one for me was I had a lady came and she had what I call first world problems. She was a little bit anxious. She had problems with her friends. She, blah, blah, blah. And we did a few sessions and she said, I'd really like you to meet my husband, but he doesn't believe in what you do at all. Okay. Because that happens to me too. That's fine. I don't mind at all. You don't need to believe in it. Right. So he comes and he couldn't get out of bed, couldn't look after the children. He'd been a really fit man and it had just gradually gone downhill to coming to me for a session was a really big effort. And we did, 5 or 6 sessions, and it was just what I would call run of the mill stuff. We were cleaning out this and clearing out that. And then he came one day and I found in his shoulder, which is interesting where it was, this traumatic life event. And I said, I feel like I'm dying. This is really scary. I'm underwater or I'm suffocating and I said, don't tell me what it is, but this is what I'm experiencing. And I've got such an incredible pain in my shoulder because unfortunately for me, I do feel it in my body. Anyway, so we discovered what it was. We released it and it took a lot of work to release that because it was huge. And after the session had finished, I said, well, can I ask you what it was? And he said, when I was about 19, I went whitewater rafting and I fell out of the boat.
Oh, wow.
My life going before me. And and I was looking up and I couldn't see anything. And then somebody just grabbed my shoulder and yanked me out. And he said, I never would have told you that because it's not in my consciousness. But yeah, I thought I was going to die. Anyway, a week later, his wife's on the phone, and this just tells you who I am. So she's screaming, and I'm like, oh God, what have I done? I thought it was something I'd done wrong. She's like, what have you done to my husband? And I said, why? She said, he's gone from being this basically couch-ridden person who could not do anything. He's down on the farm working an 8-hour shift. And I was just delighted. But wow. That was such a huge emotional block for him. But in the 6 preceding sessions, and we talked a lot, he'd never mentioned it because in his mind it wasn't what was holding him back. So he gave me a wonderful testimonial because he'd been suffering with ME for years. Now, Does that happen for everyone? No. It was just because he was really ready to release it. We'd done some other work previously, so we led up to it. But I'm so thrilled that it helped him that way. He went from the couch to being a farm. They just inherited a farm, and his wife was really worried about how they were going to manage it if he couldn't work. But
that's amazing.
Joy of my work. I love doing things like that.
So you were doing hands-on work with him, correct?
No.
When this happened?
No.
He
came. I was doing an in-person session, but I would say now 90% of what I do is remote because most of my clients don't live in the UK. But
and that was my question, because most of us, I think about, okay, my right knee hurts, right, and so I need to go to somebody, but you sort of like my best friend, right? This sort of being able to track it in the body. You do remote work with people. You don't have to be in the room with them, correct?
No, and I have a bit of a nomad energy, so I have traveled widely. So I was really thrilled that I had found something that I could do and travel at the same time. So yeah, I've been doing remote work. I mean, I trained in 2005, and I think I started traveling with it in 2010.
Right.
So I've been doing this for a decade, where I can literally, all I need is somebody's name. And it's good to know a brief outline of what they think the problem is. But generally, I tend to say, okay, thank you for that. Now I'm going to ask the body, because really the body's wisdom is so incredible. Yeah.
Wow. That's an amazing story. And I do believe that for those of us who can do this kind of work, right? It's because we were there. We visited that pain ourselves, and so we can recognize it. I was laughing about a training that I was invited to attend several months ago, and it was about building your business as a coach. And I said, well, I'm not really a coach. And somebody pushed me to at least listen to the video, the webinar, and I did. And there was a person, I'm not going to in any way give away who this person was, who's trying to build a national business teaching people how to coach. And the person's story was that when they started their coaching business, they were 25 and they were really struggling getting clients, blah, 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 and then discovered this wonderful way to get clients. And I thought, what the hell did you know at 25? I mean, who were you coaching at 20? Like, teenagers? Like, what were you trying to coach on? Because I do believe, and again, I do believe in this partnership of our soul and our body, which, I mean, it's a very Kabbalistic notion, but we come here to live experiences. And there's a reason that in other parts of the world, not the States, right, where Hollywood rules, where aging is beautiful because aging is wisdom.
Yes.
And the States, we seem to have rejected wisdom, or we recognize like how amazing people are if they never show their age, right? If you somehow can beat aging, and then there's something amazing about you, as opposed to back to an earlier comment you and I both shared around the sort of good scars you have. These are the tracks of my life. These are the good trails. One of my shaman teachers taught me that. She would say that all the time. The lines on my face are the good trails of the life I've lived. And in each of those trails, there was wisdom.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry to say, I think we're following you in Europe in that beauty is only in the, in anyone under 25. And
yes.
But I keep seeing on Facebook lots of pictures of older, wiser women. And, I think a change is happening.
I think so too. I think I'm seeing the same thing, and I'm definitely in my own life, right? Because I'm definitely moving into that time in my own life of the freedom I have. So I've stepped away from my academic dean career, and now the freedom I have to dress how I want, to put blue streaks in my hair, to look wild, to know that wild is not something. Wild woman energy is not connected to an age. Wild woman energy is connected to a spirit, and it takes courage. And so often when we're young, we can have that energy just because we don't know any better. But when we're older, we have that energy because we have the courage to actually live that person. So again, it's what we said before about walking authentically in the world without shame, without apology, right? I don't have to explain myself. This is exactly who I am. And maybe that's prosperity in a nutshell. Do you think we could describe it that way? Back to the very beginning of our conversation, that is emotional, that's like a level of prosperity, walking in my authenticity, authentically walking in this world without apology, without shame.
I think that sums it up greatly, and I have to say, I love it when very, very occasionally I meet someone who can say that. I think we live in such a culture of duplicity, and especially with social media, I need to look my best. I need to have my makeup on at all times. There's something about age where you just stop caring. I really find falsehoods irritating now, and I've never been able to do small talk, so that's just who I am. So I'm very, what you were talking about before, deep and meaningful, but I love having a conversation with somebody who knows who they are. It's so refreshing. Literally love it.
Right. And I sometimes worry that, and we've shared this thing about a few of the things that worry us, concern us about the New Agey messages, that sometimes I worry that one of those other New Agey messages is something about always becoming and never being present in being. And I do believe that we can't become our best selves if we're not present with who we are in the moment, with being in that authentic presence of who we are. And yeah, there's always room for improvement. My soul is still driving me in a direction or seducing me forward in a direction, but I can't get there by denying who I am now. And so sometimes I worry that not only are we have the Hollywood version of beauty, but then we have sort of a New Agey spiritual version of beauty that is also not quite healthy. Have you seen that?
Well, I just think, I don't know how to say this without being rude. I think there is a real tendency in some of the New Age. I'm not slating all of the New Age, but some of the New Ages, regardless of how messed up and hurt and in pain and in addiction I am, I'm gonna say I'm fine.
Right.
And the thing is, when you're around someone who's in that much pain, and you know it, you
yes.
absolutely feel it. They're more needy. They don't know who they are, so they're people pleasing. I'm not saying people who do that is a dreadful thing, but you can feel their energy. And on the superficial side of it, on Facebook, I'm fine, everything's wonderful, and underneath they're really struggling. And I have been there, so it's not like I'm judging them, but I think that's one of the issues that I think the New Age has made, is people just be happy all the time. Well, okay, but yeah.
Right. And I do think, and you also mentioned this, that there is, as long as I have positive thinking, and if you can find that article, a link to that article you said you wrote, I would love to put that in the Facebook site and just refer people to it. But sure. I do think that there is a misnomer, and I'm not sure the book The Secret actually helped with this, that if you just think it, well, no, we manifest from hidden beliefs in our core and our emotions. And manifesting something is a lot deeper than I'll just think it, right? I mean, imagine how many people would have hit lotto by now.
I know, and I'm seeing the image of this.
Imagine, it's sort of this
full of muck, and you standing there going, "I want a clean life." I mean, that's exactly what I see. Like, how can you possibly make better choices if you don't find out why you're making the bad choices in the first place? That would be something I definitely help people with. Just an aside here, I also work with horses, dogs, cats, parrots. Yeah, I can, and it can make a huge difference. Especially, I love working with horses; they're my favorite. So this muck analogy is very, very good. But just to say that out loud so that people know that.
Right, and that's one of my friends also who works with animals, and she works with Chiron, and animals, and works with what is their wound, and how, which she interprets as a sensitivity, because animals communicate in a different way. So what are they sensitive to, and how does that set them off in a different way? And if you're going to work with them, then what is that about? So I think we often forget. I saw a new puppy. I was walking on the mall with a friend yesterday outside in downtown Denver, and somebody had a puppy, and the puppy was crying, and they were just staring at the puppy, and I looked at them and said, "How long have you had her?" And they said 4 hours. I said, "Pick her up. She's scared." Like, oh, really? She's scared. So yeah, wow. This has been an amazing hour. Can you believe we've spoken for an entire hour already? And so much more to talk about. So I want people, they can find you on 1-2-Listen, correct?
Yes.
And that's probably, is that the easiest place to find you? It's 1-2-Listen?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want healing work, that's in my email-based sessions. And if you just would be more interested in like talking to the angels, then that's just as standard with everybody else. But thank you so much for having me. It's been really
okay, great. So thank you everybody for joining in today. I'm truly hoping that something we said today inspired a renaissance of spirit within you to clean out the muck, right? And build emotional, spiritual, financial prosperity for yourself. Please do stay tuned. Jennifer's on next and she's amazing. And I will talk to you next week. But thank you for tuning into the Dr. Elisa show here on 1-2 Radio, where we're changing the way you listen to the world.